All right, welcome back to Client's Corner, favorite place to get your news, knowledge, action, anywhere from TVs, books, movies, and more. Today we're back with Emily Cherkin, the screen time consultant. Last time we spoke with Emily, you were just coming out with your new book. How has everything been with that so far?
Great. Lots of steady sales, which is what we want.
Yeah, I mean you have a solid review on Amazon. That's
Phew.
what
Yeah,
I looked it up. It's the Screen Time Solution, a judgment-free guide to becoming a tech intentional family. A
that's right.
4.9.
I know. Some pretty
4.9
good
stars.
average.
Yeah,
Yeah.
4.2 on Goodreads.
Yep.
And it's currently 13% off for all of
Oh,
you sales shoppers out there as
that's
well.
right. Right. Get there. Get there.
Um, but yeah, because I feel like we spoke, oh my gosh, when was that? Like I should know this. I think it was January. No, it was
It was,
right before. No, it was like November. Because I don't think it had released yet. It was like right before.
yeah, because it released in January. So I think it was about a year ago.
Yeah, I think it was like October or November or something like that. It was like right before it was about to be released. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's got to
Great.
be pretty satisfying and like you're not, I guess, satisfied, but um, fulfilling, I guess is a
Yeah.
good word to see the hard work be, um, you know,
Physical.
put it to work.
Yeah, it's weird. Sometimes I'll be like, oh my God, I wrote a book. You know, oh, that's mine. I
Yeah.
wrote that.
You're like, I'm Emily Cherkin.
That's
That's
right.
me.
I did that. Exactly.
Do you see yourself writing a second one?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about like what that would be. Short answer, yes. Longer answer, not sure exactly what, but probably a little bit more focused on the schools piece of it, like education and technology, and um, how much of it there is, and how concerned I am about it. So, yeah.
Because your shtick is definitely basically more on focusing on family, right? Versus just
The first
your
book was, yeah. I mean, my activism has for 6 years been a lot about the screens in schools, and I've kept it pretty separate from the book and coaching and consulting. But the worlds have collided, and now a lot of actually my newest tool is something called the Unplug EdTech Toolkit for parents who want to opt their kids out of the school issued tech. And I've had hundreds of downloads on that free PDF. It's on my website now, just in the last couple months. So there's momentum there.
is it hard for parents to say no because it's free with all the tech though?
Well, it's a high cost of free, right? I mean, that's one of the problems. The other problem is that schools don't give parents an option. It's required or expected or
Um,
mandatory. And I fundamentally object to that because I don't think kindergartners need iPads to learn.
that's true. So we talk about being a screen time family. I don't think I really asked you this last time, but
Yeah.
what do you say to people who are like, I've tried this with my kid, but there's nothing I can really do there. I'll be at a restaurant because I read this one article, and
Yeah.
this guy was I forgot what it was on, but the author was saying that they're at this restaurant with a bunch of family friends, and their kids were screaming, and they couldn't stop them, so they just had to cave in and
Yep.
give them
Yeah.
a
Yeah. I
screen.
mean,
So what do you say to that?
that's a pretty common scenario. And I get parents being stressed. I've been there, done that. And I think, unfortunately, when we give screens as a way to change behavior, like stop screaming, get kids to, be quiet, we actually send the wrong message. It's easy in the moment. You're creating much harder problems in the long run. And so, I think we forget that going to a restaurant is full of skills that kids have to learn. And so, if what they learn is when I go to a restaurant, I get a phone, then what's going to happen when they're an adult? They're going to go to a restaurant and look at their phone. I mean, look how bad adults are about that, right? Like, we can't put our phones down. So, we
Yeah.
actually need to give kids lots of practice and we have to set them up and we have to teach them what the expectations are. And then, if there's misbehavior, then maybe you have to leave the restaurant. I mean, that's rewarding the misbehavior with screens is a really slippery slope.
We gotta teach him how to give him some crayon and teach him how to stay inside the line. So
Yeah, well, and actually, there's a restaurant in Seattle called Canlis, the really fancy restaurant. right off 99 above like the bridge. And they on their website say, kids are welcome and we really believe that kids should have experiences dining in fine restaurants, but we will ask you to leave if we see you pull out screens for your kid. And I sent them an email a couple of years ago and I was like, I love this. Thank you.
That's awesome. Did they
Yeah,
email
but
you back?
they did. They were like, "Oh, that's great. Thanks for that." This was before my book came out. I should probably send them a copy, but they could hand it out to the parents there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
That's
like the other side of that is there's restaurants handing out iPads. Like the restaurant provides them instead of
really?
crayons.
Actually,
Yeah,
that doesn't surprise me. Well, yeah.
it doesn't surprise me, but it's disappointing. I feel like
Yeah. I guess that's it's like that. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And it's like, am I going to blame the 20-year-old hostess who's like working at the front desk? Of course not. Like, she doesn't know, like, or, it's not their decision, but it's like, yeah, I think we default to tech too quickly as adults and as parents.
It's just too accessible in the sense of
Yeah, we make it easy. It
can't.
is easy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem is like people are like, oh, well, kids need it now, or and they're never gonna learn how to use it. I call BS on that. Like, how easy is it to use digital tech today? So easy. So easy. And it's only getting easier. And so, to make the argument that kids won't know how to do it. I mean, look at the tech you used in high school, right? Like, do you use a lot of the same? No, right? Like it's the skill,
In
the
terms
like,
of like it, like the tech that I used in school, or just like the
well,
ones
like
that
you
I.
probably always had like word processing, right? Like a Word docs, now it's Google Docs, right? Like those things are the same, but it's not like you had trouble learning how to use it the first time, right? It's the whole point of technology is that it's supposed to make our lives easier, more convenient, smooth. But I would argue that friction is a good thing, that it's like good for us to struggle in our learning processes. Like, yeah, as an adult, I want to sit down, I want to write my book, have an easy document to do that on. But I didn't start that way. I had to learn how to write. I had to learn how to
Yeah,
spell all of
I
this.
I would say I struggled more with technology in terms of just writing was when I took different classes. Like when I had to take history classes, I had to
Yeah.
do Chicago style and
Right.
footnotes
Yes.
and all
Yeah, that
those.
gets
And yeah,
confusing. MLA, APA, like
yeah,
yeah, and that's like the craft part, like the citations. That is important stuff. That's like the skill stuff. But what happens is we give kids computers before we teach them how to type. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's like me telling, and in the name of setting them up for the future, it's not like when you were 10, your parents were like, I'm gonna give you the car keys so you learn how to drive safely now, right? But that's what we're doing. Like it's ridiculous to me. We'd never give 10-year-olds car keys. We shouldn't.
no, we should not. Um, so one of the things that I asked you to talk to today was
Yeah.
about TikTok and Instagram. TikTok had for a while has had, the parental controls. At least and then Instagram has recently come out with them. But I haven't seen it. I've recently seen ads for the Instagram ones. I think I've seen TikTok maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
Maybe possibly even if not, maybe I haven't seen TikTok ones, but the Instagram ones I saw was during watching football, which is pretty crazy.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they know they're, well, here's my very cynical take on this. The only reason they're announcing these changes is because they're getting flack somewhere else. They're either being sued. I know one of the things that's happening right now is COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, is moving through, stuck in the House right now, but like moving through this, through Congress. I don't think it's going to pass. Sadly, it should, because we haven't really updated Kids Online Safety Act in years. But big tech is worried about that, right? They're spending millions of dollars to fight that legislation because it puts a burden on them. And by burden, I mean a financial one. And this is where, whenever Instagram or TikTok or any of these platforms has new parental control features, I have several problems. One, who are they putting the burden on to solve it? Parents. Two, if these companies wanted to make platforms safer for children, they could. They could do it like that.
Yeah, definitely.
They are doing the bare minimum, and they are only doing it in response to pressure, political pressure, legal pressure, legislative pressure, which I fundamentally find almost more disgusting than just admitting we're not going to do what's best for kids, which is really what they're doing. So I think the problem is it drives me nuts because people then are like, yay, good job, Instagram. You know, you're doing the right thing. Bullshit. Sorry, am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
bullshit.
saw that. I was like, it showed there's just so much I don't know, like washing. Like you ever heard of like greenwashing before?
Yep. This
It
is
was
that
like a
version.
version of like
Yep.
greenwashing,
$100%.
but fake. I don't know what to call it in
It's like
terms of.
safety washing, you know,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
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 exactly. It
yeah.
was like peaceful, harmony. Have you seen the commercial for it?
No, but I'd probably vomit. I
It's
can't
like
even.
it's like peaceful, harmonious, like mountaintop background
Yeah, right.
with
Right. And
like,
wasn't Snapchat also doing some big ad campaign about how we're not a social media platform? Like they were like, we bring people
oh, I think you're
together.
right. I swear,
I mean,
I'm.
come
Was that
on.
a Super Bowl ad or am I?
It's, I mean, it's in the last 6 months at least.
It's
Like, yeah, it's
maybe
ridiculous
not.
though. And, you know,
Yeah.
the thing to remember is like the crux of all of this is that the business model of big tech is fundamentally at odds with what's good for kids. That's it. That's the crux of this entire issue. That doing the right thing by children means lowering their profits.
Yeah. So you mentioned it was just a red herring. So you're just
Yeah.
saying it's kind of pretty much just they're like, okay, here's a commercial about it.
Yeah.
We'll do something about it, but your kids are
Yeah.
still gonna see porn on Instagram.
Yeah. I mean, if they want to, they can spend millions and millions of dollars on really effective marketing tactics to persuade all of the people who are currently scrolling through their very own platforms, right? Like that's what we're going to see as consumers. But the other thing, you know, to remember in all this is like children's brains aren't adult brains. Like they are, I mean, again, look how addicted adults are. Look how much time we're spending scrolling and, you know, mindlessly just like sitting there. And we have adult brains. Like theoretically, we can control it. We can moderate our use. Most of us still struggle with that.
Hmm.
And children's brains are far more vulnerable.
How do you kind of when you're giving instructions to parents on how to deal with
Yeah.
Instagram and all that stuff, what are some recommendations you give?
I mean, my whole tech intentional philosophy is three things: later is better, less is more, relationships and skills first. And the problem is like, is there a 16-year-old who has Instagram who's not sucked into the algorithms and consumed by all of the awful stuff? Of course, we can find exceptions all the time, but the products aren't designed, they are designed to be manipulative. And so a child's brain can't resist it. So I tell parents, like, first of all, you have to understand that this is not like you versus your kid. This is you versus hijacked neural pathways, like dopamine feedback loop. Like you're never going to be more effective, interesting, compelling than an Instagram algorithm.
Hmm.
And kids have to understand that, but so do parents. And it's also one of the hardest things for parents is remembering that kids are developmentally wired to not like what parents say, especially teenagers, right? Like, I mean, I grew up pre-internet and definitely didn't like what my parents said sometimes, right? Like that's normal. And so it's really hard for parents to separate out like what's just normal teen stuff from what's the screen stuff, right? It's hard. It's hard. So, and then I would argue too, parents have to model it. Parents have to do it too. You can't tell your kid not to have their phone in their room at night if your phone's in your room at night. That's like low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Start there.
Wow. What do you think about screen time at because internationally screen time has definitely been addressed in certain countries. Like I know in Sweden, it's talked
Yeah.
about how with the public health agency recommended that kids under the age of 2 shouldn't have any screen time. And they said kids between 2 to 5 should be limited to 1 hour per day. And
Mm-hmm.
those age 6 to 12, 2 hours. Teenagers are advised to have a maximum of 3 hours daily.
Yeah.
Do you think this should be implemented in the US, or how did you respond to
So
that?
the APA, American Psychological, or sorry, the Pediatric Association, whatever the kid one is, their recommendations are higher than that. I think it's 0 to 2. It's no screen time except for FaceTiming with relatives, like which I can totally understand. That's fine. And then 2 to 5, there's maybe it's 2 hours. I can't remember. I'd have to double check. It's a little bit more than that. They also don't give a recommendation for over age 6. The thing I mean, Sweden is actually a good example of a country that's doing some rethinking of how much tech children are having, especially in schools. Actually, that's one country that I'm looking to see like as a model for what American schools could do. But here's the thing, in America right now, do you know how much screen time on average kids 8 to 18-year-old have currently?
8 years old to 18 years old?
Yeah, on average.
7.5.
That's exactly it. Seven and a half
Really?
hours a day. That's
Damn.
exactly the number. And obviously, some of them, it's an average. So some kids have more than that. We're talking 12
Yeah.
hours a day. That is outside of school hours. So you go to school for 6, 7 hours a day, and then you come home and have 7.5 hours of screen time. That's 14 and a half hours a day, leaving 10 hours for sleep.
Honestly, that's not surprising because when I work at the Starbucks, when those kids come in,
Uh
they
huh.
get their drinks, sit down at their tables, maybe say a few words to each other, and then just sit down and go on their phones. So,
Yeah, I bet
yeah.
you have a total window into that as like watching these kids come in. And yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty scary what we're doing. I worry a lot about the lack of critical thinking, the lack of relationships, real life, real human, connection is being
Do you think a
lost.
lot of these kids fall under problematic interactive media use?
Yeah, I have a whole chapter about problematic media use and signs of it in my book.
Can you explain a little bit
Um,
what that is?
yeah, I mean, it's like a metric. Like you can sort of like, you have a problem when you tick several of these boxes. Like that's the way I wrote about it. I don't have it in front of me, but like, I mean, it's kind of like any addiction, right? Like if you're using alcohol to the point that it's interfering with your personal relationships, that's probably an indication you have a problem. The same thing is true with digital tech, right? And so you just kind of have to go through, because I always say I'm not anti-tech, I'm tech intentional, right? Like, I
Mm.
mean, my son plays video games. Like, but he also probably plays music 15 hours a week outside of school. So I kind of look at it from the whole picture, right? Like he gets good grades, he's doing other things, he's spending time with friends, and yeah, he plays video games. And so for me, it's about the balance. And what did we prioritize first as a family? What were our values around screens? But they use screens. Like it's not that I don't. I think there are some kids probably who really should have little to none. And I think that has a lot to do with temperament, brain development, brain processing stuff, right? Like all of those things. There are some kids who really think it's harmful, deeply harmful. And there's some kids who are fine. So that's why it's like you can't just say it's a one size fits all. You can't just say like if everybody does X, then we'll be fine. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, especially because some kids, and even not even just kids, as people have different learning disabilities
That's it.
that
Yeah.
make it a lot harder for them. Like me with ADHD, I know if I go and get distracted on my phone, I'll get a dopamine rush for sure.
Totally. And actually there's a really great person. I ironically follow him on Instagram. His name is Mike McLeod. He works for Grow Now ADHD and he talks all the time about ADHD kids and screens. And it is like he's like, you just can't do it, especially when they're little. Like their brains cannot handle that dopamine. And you're doing them no favors by, trying to acquiesce or accommodate or do a little bit. So but again, it's hard. A lot of this is about parent education, knowing what the right thing to do is or the right thing to say, and that's hard.
What do you recommend with parents with kids with ADHD and how to kind of deal with that with kids with young age? Because
Yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
diagnosed in third grade with ADHD. So how would you recommend a third grader with ADHD and how to deal with screen times?
yeah, I mean, I think understanding what's going on in the brain is the first step. Like understanding why an ADHD brain is seeking that dopamine, why it's going to be so much harder to pull it away, why it's going to result in behavioral, extreme responses. And, the great thing about ADHD brains is that capability of deep diving into something kids are interested in, right? Like that's one of the, I think, really cool parts of ADHD. But if it's a screen that's, hijacking your dopamine, to get out of that is not a fair fight. And so, is there something else that you can get these kids interested in? Just keeping them engaged in other activities that are off screen. That's the best thing you could do as a parent with kids with ADHD. And then, as they mature, right? Like I think a lot of it can come with maturity, with developmental progress. Like it doesn't mean kids can't have access, but I would definitely be waiting as long as possible, which is hard.
And going back to all the parental controls on
Yeah,
Instagram and TikTok, how much do you think it's actually going to work?
I think it's a performative look at how great we are. Not at all. I don't think it's going to make a difference because, first of all, even if they're effective, like as a tool, how many kids do you know who find their workarounds? Right? Like that's it. Is that the kids
I
are
certainly
way
did as a kid.
exactly. I mean, I think we're sort of naive to think that kids aren't going to be, I mean, kids are naturally curious. You tell them no, they're going to try to find out, well, why and how can I get around it? Doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they're kids. They're curious. This is like why it makes me crazy because kids are naturally curious about the world. So I get flack sometimes for saying I'm opposed to parental controls because it makes people are like, well, does that mean you're like pro child sexual abuse material? Of course not. Of course not. But I am against them in the sense that they're
That's a hasty generalization right there.
so you'd be surprised. There's
Yeah.
people out there who say all kinds of crazy stuff, but like it's it's a false sense of security. That's what I
Mhm.
worry about. Is that if parents think it's the solution and it isn't. So it's like it could be one tool in your toolbox, maybe, but like you cannot rely on those. And do you trust Mark Zuckerberg to make decisions about what's best for your children? He doesn't let his own kids on these platforms. I mean, this is the thing that we have to keep saying to parents is like, none of these big tech executives let their kids use their own products. Why? Doesn't that
Yeah.
say something about what they think of them?
I don't know if this is anywhere comparable or appropriate, but it's like drug dealers don't do use their own products. So
Exactly.
yeah.
That's it. It's exactly it. It's like, I mean, it's duh, kind of. Like, don't get high off your own supply. Is that what
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't
Yeah.
get high off your own supply.
That's
That's
it. But that's the same exact thing. I think that's a perfect metaphor.
that's honestly how I kind of if you the way you're explaining it, that's the first thing that pops into my head.
Yeah. And they send their kids to Waldorf, low tech, nature based schools where they don't use tech in the classroom or they use minimal.
Well,
It's like,
how much tech are they starting to use in classrooms now?
it's
Because when I was in
constant.
middle school, I mean, sixth grade, we started maybe like very few, every few times, maybe like once a month, we would use iPads. We got iPad like
Yeah.
to use,
No,
but
no, now we're talking, and I'm talking in Seattle public schools. Every kindergartner has their own iPad that they take back and forth to school. Now, some teachers will say, we'll keep it in the classroom. This is the problem. Like you can give them all out, and then different teachers do different things with them. I can send you a picture my friend sent me of her kindergartner sitting on the playground before school. Like you could go and play on the playground before the bell rings. All the kids are sitting on the ground looking at their school iPads. You cannot tell me that that's better than kids running around for 15 minutes before the school day starts, right? Like, so that to me is absolutely unconscionable, like that this is
that's
happening.
crazy.
But I think it's something like 90-95% of kids K-12 now have a one-to-one program at their school, meaning there's a device per kid that they go back and forth to school with.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think people realize how much it has changed even in just the last 5 to 10 years.
It's that accessible to get an iPad now in Seattle Public Schools?
K through 2 get iPads, 3 and up get, crappy Dell or some sort of computer, laptop. But yeah,
Oh,
yeah. And all they're like the science curriculum and the math curriculum are 100% digital. There's no textbooks. There's no school libraries. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's no computers in the school library anymore because
really?
yeah, because the kids all have their own. Why would we need libraries in the computer or computers in the library? There's no computer labs. Why would you teach computer lab if every kid has their own computer? But what's
Wait, even
happened?
at
Yeah, go ahead.
that's crazy. No computer
Well,
labs? What do they
no,
do like
and
standardized testing though?
they do
Or
it on
like
their own
the
personal devices in classroom. At last, I talked to a math teacher middle school math teacher, said he gave up 7 classroom days to standardized testing last year. 7. Standardized testing has gone bonkers too. 7 class periods out of what, 180 instructional days lost to testing. Max, my son, who's 16, first day of kindergarten in public schools, came home with a piece of paper that said he has to learn Control Alt Delete. 6 years old, not even 6 years old, 5 years old. And I was like, Control Alt Delete, barely knows how to write his name. And you know why we had to teach him Control Alt Delete? Because he had to log into the district computers. That time they had a computer lab to do standardized testing. They're testing kindergartners on computers.
can they even sit in a chair?
Great question. It's totally developmentally wrong. Like, it's wrong to be testing kindergartners, period. I mean, I have objections to the testing, but on a freaking computer, like, I worked with a student, 6th grade, had an iPad. Everything was on her iPad, books, notes, worksheets, homework, everything. She's cutting and pasting the questions from her Notability app, like into Google, copy paste answers. I mean, kids have been cheating for years. Like, as soon as we had internet access, it's easy to do. Like, people worry about AI, but kids have been doing it forever. But the problem is, she's sitting there cutting and pasting, and I'm like, why don't you at least type the words and, like, rewrite it in your own words and type out the answer? And she goes, I don't know how to type. The district gave her an iPad. This was not Seattle, but a nearby one, in the 6th grade, to do everything for school, never taught her how to type.
I remember getting those typing. I would get so competitive with those
Those
typing
typing
things.
games.
Oh my God. It was like how many words you could type in
Yeah.
a minute.
Yeah.
I became a really good typer because of that.
And you know what? The irony is, I actually think gamifying that is a great idea. I think typing is a skill children need, but they're not
Yeah.
getting it. That's the part I object to, is like, they're not being taught media literacy. They're not being taught typing skills. They're not being taught how to research and do citations. They all go to Google. Google is not a research method.
So what would you do if you could make a change to not allow all these screens
That's my
for
big project right now, is what would a tech intentional school look like? And to me, it's going to be one that prioritizes child development. It's going to be one that does not have one-to-one devices before ninth grade. It's going to be paper before screen almost always. I mean, that's the other thing, is like, there might be great curriculum, content, resources on digital tech. I'm not saying you can't use those in a classroom, but having each kid on a screen reading their own thing is completely developmentally wrong, not good for teaching or learning. Like, what's happening now, Seattle Public Schools just adopted a program called Go Guardian. It's a surveillance platform. So a teacher that has 35 kids in her class can now sit at her computer and watch her screen and have all 35 of her students' screens on her screen, right? So it's madness. I'm like, why? I would
so it's like
never.
a prison war?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
surveillance, right? And
Surveillance,
then,
yeah.
and also, like, that's not teaching. I wouldn't want to be in the classroom sitting at a computer watching 35 people's screens. They're going to be off task no matter what. I know that. The minute you give them a computer, they're distracted. That's the
Yeah.
other piece.
They're gonna go to the camera roll, the camera app, and
Yeah.
I did the same thing.
Well, exactly. And I'm trying to remember what the statistic is. It's something like, for every 60 minutes kids are online at school, 38 minutes are off task. Duh.
Every
Right?
68 minutes, kids are on.
For
Well,
every hour, 38 minutes are off task. So you can't tell
yeah.
me that the benefit, like whatever the 22 minutes, did I do the math right? 22 minutes left. You can't tell me that that outweighs 38 minutes of wasted time. That's a net loss.
Yeah. Because can can you deny Sylvie access for screens?
I opted her out this year. I refused the computer. And I was like, look, so it's stupid too because like she can still access her online portal at home on our school on our home computers, but I just don't want her carrying a computer back and forth. And you know, one of the things that I've noticed about her, she had a computer last year, came home almost every day with throbbing headaches. Like I took her to the doctor, I took her to the eye doctor, we got her glasses. Guess what? No computer this year, no headaches. Like it's that obvious to me that even the couple hours that she was on it at school was negatively impacting her physical health, right? Like, and not to mention just what about the learning? So I asked her this year, I was like, what's it like not having a computer? She's the only one in her class, as far as I know, who doesn't use one. And she's like, well, my hand hurts from writing more. Great. That's skills. That's fine motor stuff. I want that. Right.
Yeah, that's true.
And, you know, all the kids, her friends who still have them are like, oh, yeah, Go Guardian is so terrible. It sucks. And then I go home to do my homework, but it won't let me access the tools I need to do my homework because it blocks all these sites. And like, so I end up like going, you know, they find the workarounds, whether it's a VPN or a guest login or they use a parent computer. Like, that's what's happening is it's just so wasteful, I think, in my mind. It's wasteful, it's ineffective, it's terrible for learning. And we're just doubling down rather than pulling back and saying, maybe this is too much.
Was all this Go Guardian stuff there before COVID too, or no?
No, it's to me, it's a response to all the tech that they threw at kids. So tech was an issue before COVID. I mean, I opted max out of science, the digital science curriculum in sixth grade, and that was the year before COVID. But Go Guardian is a response to the fact that all these kids have been off task on computers for the last couple of years. I mean, duh, right? Like, so Eckstein is a phone-free school, right? They actually have a policy kids are not allowed to bring phones to school, which is brilliant. It's not, most districts don't have that yet. They're moving towards it. It makes my life as a parent so much easier. Sylvie doesn't have a smartphone, so no big deal. She's not allowed to have it at school anyway. But I was volunteering last year and I walked in and bunch of these kids are sitting in the auditorium with their computers open while they were waiting for a choir thing to finish. All of them were playing video games on their computers, their school computers. So it's great that there's no student phones where they'd be, you know, scrolling through social media, but like they're just replacing one screen with another. They're using the district issued devices for video games. And if you say, well, why are they not blocked? Because it's digital whack-a-mole. You know, you try to block one thing and something else pops up. And anything ending in, what is it, .io is like, kids are smart, you know? I mean, you would have found the
Yeah.
workarounds. You would have found the video games.
Wait, but so they can't bring their phones. Do they check their backpacks? Or how
No, the rule is it has to stay off and away for the whole day. And what's really interesting is Eckstein's actually had this policy for like 6 or 7 years. That's like really unusual. Other districts now, like Jonathan Haidt's book this year that came out, The Anxious Generation, has driven this whole movement of phone-free schools, which is great. But Eckstein was way ahead of the curve on that. So some schools are doing things like they're buying these pouches. Have you heard of the Yonder pouches that I think it was
Yeah,
Kelsey Hart who actually like
when I was
one
in
of
high
these
school,
communities. Yeah.
in some of our classes we had like phone pouches.
Well, so there's the like the shoe pocket ones. So that's what
Yeah.
Max does is like when you come into class, you put your phone in there. That's better than nothing. I wish that they wouldn't allow them all day because then what happens is kids are walking up and down in the hall and at lunch on their phones. Like they're not interacting, they're not talking. I mean, high school, it's a lot harder. I get it. But like K through 8, they shouldn't have phones at school. I mean, first of all, we know that 30% of 8 year olds have iPhones now. 8 year olds.
Like that you can actually call or just
Yeah.
work.
Or, you know, a lot of parents use Apple Watches and they think, oh, well, yeah, my kid doesn't have a phone. But I think the watches are worse because they're on their body. They're distracting. Like I saw Sylvie, her friend had left her, it wasn't even an Apple Watch, but like another kid watch. It was a digital one. And we went to return it. This was a few years ago. In the one block that it took for us to walk the watch back to her friend's house, Sylvie was doing this the entire time. Like, couldn't, it was like moth to a flame, could not pull herself away. It doesn't surprise me knowing what I know
Yeah.
about her. But like we got an email from the kindergarten or the fifth grade teacher saying, and this is in a K5 school, from the principal saying, please make sure that kids turn off their phones and watches during the school day. It's disruptive. They're going off in backpacks. And I mean, we're talking kindergarten, first grade. It's madness, Jake, madness.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. I mean, it's crazy to see when like the middle schoolers have nicer phones than I do.
Yeah, it's well, and then, there's a whole bunch of issues with that too.
Yeah,
Like,
too.
if you don't have a policy, then teachers will also say to kids, like, oh, yeah, pull out your phone and do whatever on it. Well, there's lots of equity issues with that. Some kids don't have the newest phone. Some kids don't have a phone, not many
Hmm.
anymore. But like, I know one family whose kid was told to download an app by their science teacher. This is in public school. And because the kid's phone was so old, it couldn't update to the newer version to download whatever this app was. But the teacher had told them to do it. So what does that tell these kids? Like, you have to have the latest and greatest phone in order to like participate in class.
Mm.
That's completely not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple more questions.
Yeah.
One, what is your expectations with parental controls for apps like Instagram and TikTok and
I
even,
think
all social media?
I mean, if they wanted to do something meaningful, they could. As I said before, they won't until they actually make more money doing it than not. That is the heart of the matter here. It hurts their bottom line, therefore they will never do what's best for kids.
Those to the bare minimum.
Yeah, yeah, and only when they're facing pressure, legal or legislative or whatever. Mm-hmm.
And then, oh my gosh, what was my second question? It was oh, what do you think about well, I think where was it? I did not do the research for this question, but heard about it. Was it Australia where the prime minister or president said that 12-year-olds they're thinking about waiting kids until they turn 12 to have social media? What do you think about
Yeah, there's a
that?
lot of conversation about that globally, about like at what age, right?
Yeah, what?
I mean, in the US, the law says 13 and up. That's what the federal law says. You have to be 13. But like you and I both know, there's a lot of kids under 13 using social media. And
Yeah.
PS YouTube is technically a social media app. Like it's
Hmm.
functions the same way, even though we don't think of it as one. So um, I think having policy is important. I think it's good. I think it's also not going to stop kids from doing it. I think it's also, there's a lot of parents who are part of the problem. I mean, the parents I hear from are the ones who are worried. There are a lot of parents who aren't worried enough. That worries me. Like we're talking. I mean, I don't know. Did you see that New York Times story yesterday about the AI chatbot that led a boy to commit suicide? Like,
No.
yeah, and is it a correlation? Is it a correlation or causation? Right? But it was this lonely teenage boy who befriended a chatbot, and basically the chatbot convinced him that it was better to be dead. I mean, and he took his own life. Like that's the kind of crap that's going on. And like, did you see it? Did you find it? It's in the New York Times. I mean, it's not like fringy.
Holy.
Yeah.
Florida boy killed himself after falling in love with the Game of Thrones AI. The
Mhm.
fudge?
Yeah, and like, not to get too into the weeds, but some of these ads for these sites get popped up in kids' YouTube channels on their school computers, right? So I would argue these schools are complicit in this by providing access to sites that lead kids to this content.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's so sad because, I mean, suicide is beyond tragic, but also like that this kid felt so lonely, like, uh, that's the brain development part that's so devastating. It's like they don't see the long view at that age.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, really sad. But unfortunately, like we are the activism around screens and children, like even 6 years ago when I went to a conference in 2018, like we were just trying to get people aware of the problem. Now we're trying to help people change it so that kids stop dying. I mean, there are kids who have lost their lives to TikTok challenges, to suicide because of bullying online. Like real life harms. And that's just mind boggling how quickly that's shifted from like trying to get people to care about the problem to, now looking at situations like this, which is rare, but it's real. It's
Yeah, I
happening.
mean, you wouldn't think that this would be a real thing if you told me this like a year ago, be like, oh yeah, AI would actually end up
Yeah.
the, this would actually happen because of AI could lead to this. Not lead to the,
Well,
but this could be affiliation with AI. I'd be like, oh no,
yeah.
that's not. Yeah,
Well, the AI is the wild, wild west. And
it
it's
is.
being implemented in schools. That's the other part where I am just, it has no business being used for children, like, or by children. It's not ready for public consumption. And because of the safety risks, like, it is, again, just unconscionable to me that this is happening. But,
Safety
you
and
know,
also they're just using it for school and not good
well,
work ethic.
exactly. I mean, why wouldn't you cheat? Like, it's just so
Yeah.
easy. Like, and if you're, this is the thing, brains are really smart. Brains are primed to pick the easiest route. If you give a kid an easy route to the answer, why would they do the harder one? Of course, they're going to pick the easy one. And it's not because they're
Def
bad kids, it's because that's the easy way to do it. Yeah. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
well, thanks so much for hopping on.
You're
I'll
welcome to.
probably have you on sooner than later, talk about some AI stuff as AI
Oh, God.
grows and because I'm definitely
Yeah,
AI is just crazy to me, all of this stuff and how much
it
it's
really.
growing. And like you said, it's the wild, wild west. It's really anybody's game. It's
Yeah.
whoever
Well,
whoever
look up Power Schools Power Buddy. It's their AI chatbot assistant that they're putting in schools to help children get tutoring by AI chatbots.
powers, what did you say it was called?
Power Schools the company, and their AI tool is called Power Buddy, which is just gross too, right? Like the
That just sounds like a pedoph
yeah, it does. I know.
that
Well,
sounds
and then
really
look at this
good.
story I just told you about with this kid befriending an AI chatbot. Well, if you're going to call a Power School chatbot Power Buddy, of course kids are going to make friends with it. It's so gross.
Power, I don't like that name.
No, it's creepy. Also, by the way, Power School, the company, is a $5 billion company that was bought by Bain Capital this summer. Bain Capital is connected to a lot of evil shit.
Yeah, who's the parent company of or is Bain Capital the
Our
parent?
school, Bain Capital now owns it's a private investment firm worth $185 billion.
Oh, the boy Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney's quite wealthy from it. Yeah. Let's just
Robert
say
Kraft.
they're not in it for educational benefit.
Yeah.
They saw money, they saw opportunity. So, yeah, it's pretty
Dang.
gross. Yeah.
Yeah, Power. I just don't like that name at all. It just gives
Yeah.
me the heebie-jeebies.
Right, right.
On
Because
it.
Buddy's best friend, something I can trust, something that's gonna, look out for me. And we're talking about artificial intelligence. That's not human. That's not real.
I'm still getting over that
Yeah,
the the kid dying. That's crazy.
it's awful.
That's so sad.
Hmm.
Well, have a good rest of your day. Thank you for your
Thank you,
time.
Jake. You're welcome. I hope you get some good rest.
Will
Take care.
do. Take
Bye
care. Bye
bye.
bye.